Hello again, and welcome to the April session of BusinessWise Insiders. As usual, given that we're a larger group and we have a presentation to get through, I'm going to keep everyone on mute while I walk through the presentation. And again, because the primary goal of Insiders has always been to give you all as attendees a chance to meet and learn from each other. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a discussion where we can talk about different aspects of the topic we'll discuss today, and give you a chance to introduce yourselves, ask questions about this or any other biz dev topic that might be on your mind. If you do have a question during the presentation, you can either write it down and ask it later in the discussion, or feel free to ask it in the chat window and we'll try to get to it. So with that, let's get into today's topic. And as Deborah alluded to, we're going to be talking about what to do when your prospect says no, and look at 4 specific types of objections and how to turn that resistance into leads and appointments. But before we start, I did want to emphasize that the no's we're talking about for the purposes of this presentation are the ones that you get at the very beginning of the prospecting process, when you're working to set those first-time appointments with new prospects who may not know about you or your company. And even though some of the material in this presentation may apply later in the process when you're already in discussions with a prospect and talking about potential buying decisions, we're really focused on overcoming that initial resistance to a first-time appointment. So with that in mind, put yourself in that mindset of reaching out to a new prospect for the first time. What do you say when you reach out, whether it's over the phone or in an email, and your prospect says no? And there are a couple of important points here. First, this is almost a trick question, which is really sort of the crux of this presentation, because just about everybody says no to that first request. In fact, it's so uncommon for a prospect to eagerly accept that you have to wonder what's going on there if they do, and whether there's an opportunity that's going to lead to a valuable relationship. So really what we're asking is, when that initial resistance inevitably comes, are you prepared to respond, and what's your strategy? Sorry, one second. But let's back up for a second and look a little closer at the question of, why should I care about no? Now, you might be thinking, of course, sales reps can't take no for an answer. We deal with no all the time. And you're right. The first reason we need a strategy for no is that no is a fact of life in B2B sales. A sales rep doing cold outreach and not having a strategy for no is like a golfer not having a strategy for when they don't get a hole-in-one. Of course, we want the immediate and eager yes, just like we want a hole-in-one, but it's not realistic. No's are part of the game, and we have to prepare for them. But I've seen it so many times. Sales reps become so fixated on explicitly promising leads that they run right past any signs of resistance. Their no strategy essentially becomes, no problem, thanks for your time, let me know if your mind changes. But the reason that no's are potential opportunities is because they're not actually no's in a lot of cases. No, especially at the beginning of the cold prospecting process, means I don't see value yet, and that's okay. Just like the golfer's job is to move the ball toward a tiny hole that's hundreds of yards away over bunkers and water hazards, it's the sales rep's job to move a prospect toward a yes in the face of resistance by helping them to understand and perceive value. And the final lesson here is that it's not just about pushing back at resistance. You can't just tell your prospect they're wrong, because you will never win that argument. Instead, you need to change their perspective by getting at what they care about, and in many cases, offering third-party justification for why they meet with you. That way, it's not an objection to you, but to a trend or idea or insight that has been made by an established third-party authority. And how you dig deeper will depend heavily on the kind of resistance your prospect offers. Different categories of resistance will lend themselves to different strategies for shifting your prospect's perspective. So today, we'll do our own digging into these 4 common objections. Not interested, when they don't have a problem or are happy with the way things are. A bad experience, they tried something before that was similar and it was terrible. Bad timing, they have a lot going on, no budget right now, the contract isn't up. Or send more info. Not right now, but send me some info and I'll get back to you. We're going to look at what they might really mean, and then specific tactics you can use to steer the conversation in a promising direction. But before I get started looking at each of these in greater detail, just wanted to invite Deborah to offer any other introductory remarks.
Thanks, Sam. It reminds me of the olden days when all we had to know about was our product. And then later we had to know about our prospect. So we still have to know about our product. We still have to understand our prospect. But most of all, we have to understand the bigger picture and the trends and what's going on in the world of business, not just our world, but our prospects' world, to be effective. And we have to do all those things today.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We were talking yesterday as we were preparing for this session that several years ago, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, a lot of this might have been just about questions that you can ask in response to resistance to uncover pain. But we're really in a different era where asking questions about pain isn't enough anymore, and you need to offer something to your prospect rather than just ask a question and hope they volunteer information. And that's actually a great segue to the first objection we'll be looking at, which is the generic, I'm not interested, I'm okay with the status quo. So here you have your prospect giving that sort of all-encompassing version of the not interested objection. Not interested, things are fine, we're happy with our current vendor, we don't want or need it. And underneath you have some possible subtext, what they might actually be saying that gives you an opportunity to show some value. So not interested might actually mean it hadn't occurred to me that I might have a problem or that I could benefit from a solution. And the key phrase here is it hadn't occurred to me. Again, no means I don't see value yet. And the reason it hasn't occurred to them is because they don't know what you know, that the ideas, insights, and ultimately products and services that you bring to the table can provide a better understanding of what really matters to their success. So if the not interested objection in particular is one of the most common catch-all ways that a prospect can resist, and it can take many forms. Again, X isn't a problem right now. I don't see the benefit. We don't have that problem. Things are going fine. It's sort of a blank slate that invites you to respond with open-ended questions that clarify pain and that provide a new perspective. Now, again, a few years ago, the first question here might have been something like, if X isn't a problem right now, then can you tell me what problems and priorities you are facing? But any sales rep can ask questions about pain. And in that transaction, the prospect receives nothing of value. In fact, they're giving information to you when it should really be the other way around. So the new tactic is, again, to help clarify pain for your prospect by offering ideas and insights that you know will matter for them. Now, of course, you can also flip it around and focus on what is working, which is a great way to get your prospect talking and present new opportunities. And then the last question here is an example of a question that we at BusinessWise might use, but that you can adapt to whatever your product, service, or solution is. Clarifying questions like these rephrase and reframe the issue and might get a different response that can lead to a conversation. So the key takeaways here are: expect resistance. Golfers don't come to play with only their driver. They put a dozen different clubs in their bag and they practice hitting out of the rough and out of the sand. Sales reps should be clear on the value you bring to the first appointment, even if the prospect will never buy. And you should be comfortable with a number of different ways to reframe the issue in a way that helps clarify what your prospects really want and need. As you uncover what's important to them, you may find it appropriate to disqualify a prospect. So this is another key point here. This is about qualifying. Your time is valuable. Your client and prospect relationships are valuable. So you get to decide who you do business with, just like your prospect gets to decide whether they want to meet with you. Deb, did you want to elaborate on that?
Just as you were saying, Sam, we as sellers and professional salespeople have equal status with our prospects. So it's important to decide before we make our call or before we write our email message where we want to meet, where and when we want to meet with our prospective buyer. So for some of us, we want to meet regardless of where the prospect is in their buying process. It can, for us at BusinessWise, it can be very early when they're not thinking about this at all. For other people, you may only want to meet with people who are actively looking and engaging in the process. But it's important to know what you want to do before you engage in that conversation.
Exactly. And that's really part of anticipating. You anticipate that your prospect will resist, and you know exactly what your goals and objectives are. And that helps you get to the end goal that you're looking for. So that brings us to the second objection, which is bad timing. So bad timing is one of those objections that could take many different forms. So prospect might have a lot going on at the particular moment, and the issue you're looking to help address isn't a priority. Maybe it's that the budget isn't there right now, or that they just signed a contract with another vendor. It all boils down to not right now. But what they may really mean is, I have a decent reason to say no now, but under different circumstances, I might say yes. And that's good, because it means there's a promising flip side to the bad timing objection, that another time might be better. And the best way to unpack the bad timing objection is to get to the root of why that might be the case. And so here you have a few options. The first is to go right at the heart of the objection. If it's a bad time, then something is keeping your prospect from addressing their problems, which is itself a problem. The second is to emphasize that you're not asking your prospect for anything more than a no strings attached meeting. They'll get some ideas. It costs them nothing. So timing and budget shouldn't even be a concern. And then finally, another time might actually be better, which gives you an opportunity to create a mutually agreed upon timeframe for follow-up. So to put it simply, ask, if not now, when and why? Because bad timing often means either we don't think we have the budget right now, or we don't see this as a high priority right now. And that's your cue to offer insights and ideas and change their perspective. If in doing so, you can demonstrate value in the form of ROI, then a budget may magically appear and the time may be right. And then again, if it really isn't the right time, you can create a plan for follow-up. Deborah, anything you wanted to add?
I just want everyone to make sure that if you are asking for that first appointment to just share ideas and insights, you really need to be prepared with interesting ideas and insights, and not just a bunch of questions to your prospect for the answers that they already know. In those cases, they're looking for new information from you. You have it. You know, as long as you research it, this is a good time to Google 2022 trends for whatever industry your prospect might be in. There's all sorts of articles. There's information in the business press, whether it's the Harvard Business Review or Gartner or Forbes. There's all sorts of information out there, but you got to take the time to look at it, share it with your colleagues, and practice.
So moving on to objection number 3, this is when a prospect has had a bad experience with a similar product or service in the past. So on the top, you have the prospect saying, I tried something similar before and it was terrible. I'm not making the same mistake twice. But on the bottom, here's what it could really mean. I had a problem. I tried to fix it. It didn't work. And I'm afraid of spending money on another doomed attempt. So the bad experience objection is an explicit acknowledgement that your prospect knows he has a problem that needs fixing. And since uncovering and clarifying pain is the first step toward discussing solutions, this kind of objection is actually a great opportunity to ask some pointed questions to get your prospect talking. In some ways, it means your prospect has 2 problems, the original problem and then a fear of addressing it. And you can use both to illustrate the costs of an action. And our takeaways here are really meant to emphasize that this bad experience objection presents a sort of target-rich environment for clarifying your prospect's problems and changing their perspective. There's the old problem, which presumably hasn't gone away. There's a new problem, a fear of acting and failing. And all of this can help you reframe their definition of value. And your unique value, your insights in combination with your solution, will help them see and solve their problems in a way that no one else can, which in effect makes the bad experience objection irrelevant for purposes of a discussion with you. Deb, anything to add?
This is not the time to explain why you and your company will not create problems for your prospect. That comes much later in the process. This is the time for empathy, understanding, and bringing new insights to the game.
And then finally, we have the fourth objection, which is send more information. This objection of sending more info is tough because it can seem like less of an objection than it actually is, and it can tempt you to handle it in the wrong way. But in truth, send me more info is just a non-confrontational way of saying no. So if you take them at their word and send them some info with the hope that they'll call you back eager to meet, they won't. That's what they want you to do so that they can ignore you. But luckily, it opens the door to reframing your prospect's problem and delivering value on issues that resonate with them. So here you see the generic objection on top, but what they're really saying is, I don't want to deal with this right now, so I'm going to stall. And I probably do this with all of my problems. So what's the best strategy in this case? Again, you can take this in a few different directions. The first is to take their objection as a cue to show them you don't want to waste their time. More info won't help if it's not relevant to their needs. So pointing them to your website probably won't help. Instead, ask, I'm happy to send info that's relevant. Tell me more about what you'd like to know. Also, offering a short, no strings attached meeting is a far better alternative than sending more info. They'll gain insights and ideas, and you'll be able to better understand what they really want and need. And finally, as a last resort, you can use their own request to create that follow-up plan, which may give you another chance to ask some of these same questions. So agreeing to send some follow-up materials, but making a specific plan for follow-up and being prepared with the questions to clarify. Now, of course, the one thing to be really careful about in this scenario is that endless stall where they keep asking you for more information, you keep sending it, and you never have a chance to qualify them as a promising or less valuable prospect. So if possible, aim to get that answer on your first call rather than to kick the can down the road. Otherwise, be very clear and strategic about qualifying and about making a plan for follow-up. Deb, any insights here?
I always think it's best to let your prospect give you the time frame to follow up. So when you don't want to drive them crazy and you don't want to keep pestering them, when would you like me to follow up next? And be quiet.
Right. And in some cases, the time frame they define will be even shorter than the one you would propose, which is obviously a win for you. And now that we've looked at the four main categories of prospect resistance and how to use each to start a conversation, I wanted to offer a quick bonus tip, and it has to do with how to handle resistance specifically over email. And I want to look just quickly at what makes email rejection unique, what separates it from cold calling rejection. And in some ways, it actually isn't unique. And that's the first point here. If you're prepared to dig beneath the initial resistance on a cold call, you should be prepared to do the same over email. But too often, sales reps simply ignore or delete negative email responses to their email campaigns, banking on the fact that a positive response will eventually come. And this may have to do with the fact that cold calls require more effort than emails, so you're more likely to keep pushing after you've already invested the time and energy it takes to get a prospect on the phone. Whereas email campaigns that are automated or that go to thousands of prospects simultaneously don't require a lot of initial effort. And that's part of their appeal, after all. So you're primed for them to be a sort of convenient source of eager leads. But with email, a no gives you a lot of valuable information that a cold call no may not give you, and it gives you an opportunity that you can use. So the information you get from an email no is that your message resonated enough for your prospects to reply, because they don't have to. They can unsubscribe, ignore, delete, but they didn't. They clicked reply, they typed a message, and they hit send. And that's an indication that they at least skimmed your message enough to understand what you're asking. Moreover, you now have an opportunity to accomplish a really important objective of cold email outreach, and that's to show your prospect that there's a real live person on the other side. We've talked a lot about conveying your humanness in emails and other insiders presentations, and this is an opportunity to do just that. Your prospect's response gives you the chance to start a one-on-one conversation, which is already a lot more promising than where you were before you sent your email or launched your campaign. And then as a bonus, these asynchronous conversations where you send an email and a couple of days later they send a response and then you send a response, they're more likely often to be resurrected at some future date than a conversation that starts with a cold call. So it really pays off to start that conversation and build some momentum that could eventually lead to an opportunity. And some quick ideas to remember here. Responding promptly is really important. All you know at the point you get an email rejection is that your email got your prospect's attention. So take advantage and get back to them while it's still top of mind. If you wait even a day, your prospect may be mentally checked out and you've lost your chance. Second, as I just mentioned, this is your chance to show your prospect that you're a real life person by crafting a personal response to what they actually write. And a great way to do that is to respond specifically to what your prospect writes. It's really critical. So just keying off phrases that they include in the rejection. Everyone will be unique. Some may be friendly, and you should key off as whatever distinct about that email to reinforce that they're having a conversation with a real person who's listening. And then finally, again, moving the conversation forward by asking questions and offering insights that are designed to learn more about your prospect's mindset and to give them perspective on their problems and priorities. When your prospect answers your questions, you'll have even more to go on for your next response and a better idea of what kind of value they need in order to continue engaging with you. Deb, any final thoughts?
For our clients that are doing AEP, automated email prospecting, many of them found that they were getting too busy with work and life and all of that stuff to respond to the no replies that they were getting. Everybody knows what to do when someone replies and says, sure, how about meeting next Thursday at 2? It was the no's that were causing some of our clients problems with immediate responses. And we do, at our clients' request, we began to offer a service where we will do those replies for you. And I'm just reminding all of you to check with your rep and find out more about that if it's something that you think would be helpful.
Yeah, you know, as Deb mentioned, we found that so many of these key things, responding promptly, keying off individual pieces of their email, and asking questions to start conversations, were things that were just falling through the cracks. And that initial inbox management is basically doing what we're talking about in this presentation, which is dealing with that initial resistance in a way that gives you an opportunity to show value of that initial engagement. Well, with that, thanks everybody for attending. And in a moment, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can have a breakout.